Good morning, Miss Sharon. This is Jonathan responding to discussion board post number three. As usual, these discussion board posts seem so simple, but yet pose such a challenge. First, I want to respond to your post. I do appreciate that you've taken the time to break down how we formulate a hypothesis from its initiation and try to form a theory or conclusion. With respect to the discussion board question about failing to reject the null hypothesis, when I heard it, it actually triggered me to go somewhere I don't know that the question intended, which was that we were creating a type 2 error. But when I looked at the literature, I realized that there's actually a little bit more to it than simply a type 2 error, what it led me to believe. Um, you actually broke that down and saying rejecting the null hypothesis may result in type 1 error that rejects the null hypothesis when it is true. A bias error is not type 1 or type 2, but challenging to detect. So I think you thought about the question the same way I did, which was interesting. Um, and so as I started writing my response to the question, I led with, and I'll just read it. I said the failure to reject the null hypothesis when the hypothesis is actually false is considered a type 2 or beta error. But I realized retrospectively now that I'm responding that the question didn't have anything to do with a type 2 error. Specifically, it actually just asked about if you, I guess in our sense, if our literature or our research doesn't yield results to show that there's any differences in, let's say, two groups, right? And so, of course, that doesn't mean there was any error at all. We could have simply not found the results we wanted. But when I look at, so Freeman and Miller says to accept the null hypothesis, however, does not prove and an effect does not exist. The only thing that one can conclude is that a lack of sufficient evidence exists to demonstrate the null is false. So that's real technical. Essentially, I use examples to help me understand this a little bit better. If I'm doing research, let's say of all the Regent staff and employees, and I say I want to know whether the sleeping habits of Regent employees mirror that of the general population, or do they sleep, let's say, more or less? Let's presume it's less. That's my hypothesis. Well, if there's 300 Regent employees and I only get a sample of 30, my results may show that the sleeping habits are not any different from the general population. However, if I was able to sample, let's say, 200 employees, then I might actually find that on average, the region employees sleep a lot less than the general population. So essentially, what they're saying is there's probably some effect that actually exists in our research, but there are other problems that prevented us from finding it, such as the size of the population that we use to run the study. But my next question is to me was, well, what does that mean in general about all research that we do? Because when I started reading, like I went back to Mertler and Reinhardt, it sort of suggested that there is probably some differences in most studies that we run. We just haven't had enough power or effect size or sample size to really be able to figure out what those differences are. It's not very likely that any two groups are exactly the same or there's no differences at all. We just haven't had enough strength in our study to find them, which was interesting. So definitely would like to hear back from Dr. Hoover and his brilliant insight to help us break this down because once again, it just made my mind go, what? And that's not something I don't know that I've heard that before or interpreted that way. So anyway, look forward to your feedback. Hope you're enjoying everything so far. Take care. Have a good day.